Welcome to Everyday Economics, the podcast that helps you learn about the economic world happening around you every day. I'm your host, Chris Krug, CEO of the 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan Franklin News Foundation. Everyday Economics, a production of America's Talking Network. You can subscribe to all of our podcasts at americastalking.com. To support Everyday Economics, please make a tax-deductible charitable contribution by clicking the link in the show description. We are recording this episode on Friday, August 2nd. And join me, as always, my friend and colleague, PhD economist, Dr. Orphe Divounguy. Dr. O, there are weeks where there's, I wouldn't say that there's, not much going on, but there are weeks where there's definitely a lot more going on. And the economy, those outward measures that pretty much anybody who's paying attention can see. We had a lot of data that landed. The jobs report came in, and that actually just came in. We're taping this on Friday morning. It came in today, and it came in with the economy adding only 114,000 jobs. That's not a great number, and then we have corresponding unemployment at 4.3%, that's going up. We've talked about like sort of the environment in which sort of job seekers are kind of. Maybe fewer job seekers right now, people not as willing to apply for jobs. And of course, I continue to just hear on the street, people who are out of work, just having difficulty finding the kind of job that they wanted to find at the kind of pay that they had previously had, specifically for people who have been downsized. There's a ton to unpack here. So why don't we let's let you just jump right into it.
Totally. Remember, we went from a super hot housing market during the pandemic, one where workers were in the driver's seat. Employers couldn't keep workers, right? Couldn't find them and couldn't keep them.
Yeah.
And
you said housing market. You mean you meant to say labor market? Yeah.
That's right. In the jobs market. And it was a market where basically wage growth soared. Drivers were clearly in the workers were clearly in the driver's seat. The unemployment was stuck very low. And this jobs market basically went from hot to neutral, right? And maybe even a little bit weak in the last month.
Yeah.
In the latest number. So I think what we see here is hiring continue to slow. Employment increased less than expected. And basically, I think recession fears are starting to creep up. And the market's now pricing a 50 basis point rate cut for September because of those concerns. The unemployment rate, besides the pandemic job loss, the unemployment rate's now up to 4.3% from 4.1%. It's the highest it's been, again, aside from the pandemic, it's the highest it's been since February of 2018, right? And so we're seeing that increase. Now, the thing, though, to keep in mind is that if the unemployment rate is rising because we've got a surge in the labor force, an increase in the labor force, maybe coming from immigration, for example, right? Then we're not. There's no reason to be too concerned, because an increase in labor supply was basically helpful to loosen the labor market somewhat. Mm-hmm. If, on the other hand, most of the decline is coming from less hiring, but also more layoffs, then there are reasons to be concerned.
Right.
To be concerned. So far, layoffs remain low. Hiring has slowed, but layoffs remain low. We've had a big increase in labor supply. And so those are good things. In fact, if we continue to get increases in labor supply, then we'll likely continue to see both employment increase, but also unemployment, the number of people unemployed, also increase at the same time.
That's an interesting phenomenon. So, in like kind of getting into the grit of the jobs report that came out, and of course, these are always amended, but the initial report, healthcare and the social assistance industry, and a lot of that is government, if not government like light, it's government funded jobs, that made up 64,000 of those of the
Absolutely.
jobs in this market, and then there was an additional straight 17,000 like straight government jobs. So I mean, you're talking about 81,000 of the 114,000 jobs that were
Net.
added per the report,
Yes.
coming either directly from or indirectly, with help, a significant portion of them from taxpayer dollars.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we talked about this in the last month. I think job gains have been concentrated in a number of sectors. Some of them are sectors that took a long time to recover from the pandemic.
Yeah,
Uh, but remember, it's not just how those jobs are created. There's also a ton of demand for healthcare
right,
services.
right.
Since the pandemic, right? It's been rising. Our population is also aging, and so that demand for healthcare is pushing wages, wage growth in that sector
Mm-hmm.
higher still, and it's attracting more workers to the sector. Um, right, so it was crippled by major labor shortages for a long time, and so that could explain part of why we're seeing the big uptick in healthcare and social assistance. Um, I thought one positive thing was the increase in employment in construction. Uh, Hopefully, more private sector construction, more residential construction, because that's exactly what we need in this country: more residential housing being built in order to close a massive housing unit deficit that we have across the country. Another thing I think to highlight about this jobs report is wage growth has slowed. Wage growth has slowed to 3.6% year over year, down from 3.9% in June. So we're really seeing the slowdown here, right? Part of it is the supply side effect I mentioned earlier, and part of it is the cool down in labor demand as well. I think we're seeing a jobs report that is closer and closer to the edge of the cliff, and that means the Fed will cut interest rates almost. It's a almost guarantee, 100% guarantee
Yeah.
in September. Uh, Again, we will see what happens this month with the CPI number and the PCE number, but I think we're there.
Well, I don't want to bury the lead, because I mean this. I think we've talked really since, like, I think the fourth quarter of last year, about rate cuts, Fed rate cuts,
Yeah.
and so when you and I were talking before the show, that you're thinking that we will see now, because of where we are and where this is headed, specifically, the job numbers and unemployment, other factors that you're looking at in the market, that you're thinking that we are going to see at least a couple, possibly three
No,
rate cuts before the end of the year
I, I,
now?
I don't know about three. I think we should take that one just like Chair Powell says. Look, let's take it one at a time.
Okay.
One jobs
I'm not
report.
trying to be overly optimistic. I mean, I've been
Totally. One job.
I'm fairly pessimistic with regard to the number. When, like, I mean, remember,
Yes.
there were analysts at the beginning of this year that said we could see as
Oh,
many as six.
exactly. And we've
We've
seen
seen
that.
zero. We haven't had a rate cut, and we haven't had a change to the rate in 8 months now.
That's right. We thought lots of people thought, and you and I talked about this back in December, that this was completely unrealistic given where the economy was. But the economy has moved towards
Yes.
closer towards the 2% target. We've made a ton of progress, and now where we are, we're basically at an economy that's slowing. We're at an economy that's more of in a neutral position. And so Fed policy has to reflect that. It
Right.
has to go from very restrictive to more neutral. Now, the speed of that adjustment will really depend on the type of data that we're going to get in the months to come. But I think the Fed is going to start after this report will be a little bit more concerned about the labor market. They've already hinted that. We wrote about it in the Center Square Everyday Economics column, that the Fed, I think for 3 weeks now, I've been writing about the fact that the Fed would shift its focus from inflation to the labor market. And I think we're there now, where the concern is a little bit higher because we had a soft jobs report. It remains to see if we're going to see it in inflation. I think we will, because if you think about what wage growth really is, it's basically a combination of productivity growth and inflation. And so if we have productivity growth at 2.8% and we have a wage growth at 3.6% or something like that, then basically inflation is very low, below the Fed's target. And I think the Fed knows that. It's going to it's going to act in order to prevent the economy from cracking under the pressure of higher interest rates.
Yeah, well, I appreciate your thoughts as always. For Orphe, Divounguy, this has been Chris Krug. Subscribe to Everyday Economics and dozens of other high-quality podcasts at americastalking.com.